Hi, I'm Andrew K. Wallace. Picture a conference room in 2026 with the blinds half drawn. On the table is a live dashboard tracking residential absorption rates, developer liquidity, and mortgage prepayment speeds across 3 continents. One tile shows Tier 2 Chinese cities. Another shows Toronto's outer suburbs. A third, the Sun Belt. The colors are different. The math is not. Somewhere in the room, a portfolio manager decides to stop rolling exposure and let a position mature into silence. No announcement, just a reallocation. That's how this story is moving. China's ghost cities were never a mystery to people who read balance sheets instead of headlines. Rows of towers without residents weren't built for people. They were built for growth targets, for employment, for collateral. Concrete and steel became a financial instrument, not shelter. And for a long time, it worked. Here's the quiet part. Real estate in China wasn't priced on cash flow. It was priced on belief. Belief that prices would rise. Belief that land sales would fund local governments. Belief that households would store savings in apartments because there were few alternatives. Belief became leverage. Leverage became scale. Scale hid fragility. When sales slowed, developers borrowed more. When borrowing tightened, pre-sales filled the gap. When pre-sales slowed, trust eroded. The system didn't collapse in a single moment. It stalled. Projects froze mid-construction. Payments continued on assets that didn't exist yet. The towers stood, empty, finished enough to be counted, unfinished enough to be unlivable. This is what happens when price divorces from use. The common assumption was that China's situation was unique, different political system, different capital controls, different culture. That assumption is comforting. It's also incomplete. The mechanism wasn't cultural. It was structural. Cheap credit. Policy incentives to build, a belief that housing scarcity would be permanent, a demographic curve that quietly peaked, and a financial system that treated property as the safest possible collateral. Sound familiar? Look west. Canada's housing markets priced on perpetual inflows and low rates. Australia's investor-heavy ownership structures. Parts of the US where prices doubled while wages didn't. Different flags, same leverage. The mistake isn't building too much. It's building for yesterday's demand using tomorrow's debt. Here's a scene you can picture. A suburban development outside a major North American city. Streets are paved, utilities installed, homes are occupied. On paper, it's nothing like a Chinese ghost city. But look closer. Investor-owned units, variable rate mortgages resetting higher, rent covering payments only if occupancy stays perfect. That's not shelter. That's a yield model. Yield models don't tolerate friction. In China, friction arrived when buyers stopped believing unfinished apartments were risk-free. In the West, friction arrives through rates, insurance costs, taxes, and demographics. The entry points differ. The exit pressures rhyme. The pivot point in these systems is subtle. It's not when prices fall. It's when liquidity dries up. When transactions slow enough that price discovery stops. When sellers refuse to sell and buyers can't buy. Markets don't crash then. They freeze. Frozen markets expose leverage. Ask yourself a calm question. If housing prices only work when credit expands faster than incomes, what happens when credit tightens permanently? Not temporarily, permanently. That's the outdated belief I want to challenge. That housing always recovers because people always need homes. People do need homes. They don't need financialized housing at any price. Concrete has no yield without people. Steel doesn't pay interest. Buildings don't refinance themselves. In China, local governments depended on land sales to fund operations. When sales collapsed, budgets did too. Services suffered. Confidence fell further. The feedback loop tightened. The state stepped in, not to rescue prices, but to contain disorder. That choice tells you everything. Stability matters more than valuation. Now watch how capital responds. Chinese households reduce property exposure. Savings move into gold, overseas assets, anything liquid. Developers shrink. Banks extend and pretend. Losses are recognized slowly because recognizing them quickly would force decisions no one wants to make. That pattern is not foreign to Western systems. Look at refinancing schedules in Canada and Australia. Look at office-to-residential conversions that don't pencil out. Look at insurance withdrawals from climate-exposed regions in the US. These are not isolated issues. They are pressure points. Ordinary life intersects here in quiet ways. a mortgage renewal letter with a higher payment, a bank appraisal that comes in lower than expected, a condo assessment for deferred maintenance, each one manageable on its own. Together, they change behavior. Behavior is the real variable. When buyers step back, prices don't fall immediately. They stop rising. That's enough. The entire model depends on appreciation to justify leverage. Once appreciation is questioned, time becomes the enemy. In China, time ran out because demographics turned. Fewer buyers, aging population, urbanization slowed. The West isn't identical, but the direction is similar. Lower fertility, slower growth, higher debt service. These are not opinions, they're statistics. So why isn't this being discussed openly? Because systems don't like mirrors. Because housing underpins consumer confidence, banking stability, and political legitimacy. Talking about repricing invites it. Instead, you'll hear about soft landings, about localized issues, about resilience. Again, not lies, partial truths. The ghost cities are a warning not because they're empty, but because they reveal what happens when asset value detaches from human use. When buildings exist to satisfy spreadsheets rather than lives, they become liabilities the moment the spreadsheet changes. Smart money understands this. It's not shorting cities, it's reducing duration, shortening exposure, favoring assets with cash flow tied to current demand, not projected belief. It's not dramatic, it's deliberate. There's another layer. Housing isn't just an asset, it's social glue. When it becomes unaffordable or unstable, trust erodes. People delay families, delay moves, delay spending. That feeds back into the economy. Slower growth justifies lower prices. The loop closes. In China, that loop is well underway. In the West, it's forming. This doesn't mean cities will empty out. It means prices will stop carrying the weight of expectation. And when expectation leaves, leverage has nothing to stand on. The most unsettling realization comes late. When people understand that the value they relied on wasn't intrinsic, it was conditional, on rates, on growth, on belief. Concrete and steel don't disappear when belief fades. They remain, silent, heavy, unyielding. And that's the lesson the ghost cities offer. Not that building was wrong, but that building without enduring demand turns permanence into risk. Power moves quietly in these moments. Capital withdraws before narratives change. Exposure is reduced before headlines catch up. Those who anticipate the shift preserve options. Those who don't discover too late that assets they thought were solid have become immobile. When that realization arrives, it doesn't feel like collapse. It feels like standing in a finished room that no longer has a purpose, wondering when the value left, and realizing it didn't leave suddenly at all. It left gradually, and it didn't ask permission.